Good morning, ladies. Did you think we forgot about you? I had a day in New York City yesterday, which ended up being just a rainy, I won't call it a nightmare because I still had a good time, but you're not here for that. It's week 13 in the NFL. It's week 13 in fantasy football, and we are here to make fun of our fantasy league. With me, as always, bright and early on a Sunday morning, Daniel Metzger. Thank you for waking up early. How you doing today, buddy?
Doing great, man. Ready to start this day. It's gonna be a fun day of fantasy football for all of us. Well, not all of us, one of us.
Certainly only one of us, and the bill of goods that you sold me on Joe Mixon is looking like he's not going to play for the second straight game. So not quite sure what you thought when you were doing this, but apparently it's working out really well for your plan. But yeah, our game's going to be an interesting one. It's going to be the last game we're going to talk about in case you guys didn't pick up on that. No guest this week. Our buddy Phil wasn't able to make it, which is part of the reason we're shooting so late in the week. So thanks, Phil. I love waking up at 6:30 on a Sunday morning after walking 10 miles. So yeah, that the timing of all of this worked out perfectly. Dan, let's just talk a little bit about week 12. Do you have any big takeaways from last week? I have a few.
Big takeaways, no. I mean, just kind of same storyline all year. I thought Steve was gonna get Horvath was gonna get a nice win. Couldn't pull it out at the end. Disappointed. I was really hopeful for him.
Literally, one of my takeaways is Horvath is still an unlucky son of a bitch because this guy goes up against the buzzsaw of Josh Jacobs. And Dan, I know you pay attention to fantasy Twitter. There were people whose rosters they were showing their rosters that actually beat Josh Jacobs in week 12. It was a really weird week. And Horvath almost pulls it off. Najee Harris scores a touchdown and then leaves the game at halftime, where all Horvath needed was one more touchdown and it's over. And he takes down whoever he was playing, Greg rather, which really could have helped me. I was rooting for three teams last week, myself, Taylor, and Horvath, and Horvath just couldn't get it done. Continues that unlucky streak. Go ahead though, buddy.
Yeah, that was a crazy week. We talked. None of us, I don't think, gave Horvath a chance in the world of winning that game. And then, yeah, I was sitting there. I got home from hockey practice Monday night, saw him score that first touchdown. I was like, all right, let's go. And next thing I know, he's out. I'm like, oh man.
I have to say, having Horvath in a chance to win games is really fun just for me as a person. Horvath texts me during the week when he has a chance to win. He is like so invested and into it. And we talk about football. And Horvath's a busy guy. He has like 18 kids. We don't have a lot of time to talk to one another. But when he is in fantasy football, we talk all the time. And he's play by play in the Josh Jacobs shit for me. And then at the end, we're both just like, motherfucker. Like he bust off an 86-yard run to end overtime. That's just not fair. Like that was Horvath's game. He had that shit. And then Josh Jacobs all over his face. So it was no good. The other one I had, bittersweet for one of the OGs, for our buddy Rob Motz. A little late for a 150-point week, kind of showing everybody why they're happy he's not in the playoffs. His team finally shows up, but too little, too late, I believe is the expression.
Yeah. I think he still has an outside chance, but
100%.
It's gonna be rough for him. He has a tough road to get there. He's gonna need some help.
Well, I was gonna say the shit talking he did on our week 11 show, where JR was the beginning of his winning streak to get into the playoffs, really is looking bad now with an absolute choke job of 60 points in week 11 and then bounces back with a 149.
Yeah, that's tough. And and not that it's our teams, but you know how that is when you just have those terrible weeks followed up by those great weeks. You're just so frustrated. Like, why couldn't I have just gotten some of this last week?
Yeah, just a couple more of those plays, and I'm going to be interested. I think Rob might end up being a little frustrated this week. I think it's going to be interesting to see if that's what his team is. Just one of those teams that just alternates weeks. Dan, let's get into the playoff picture. I always go first. I'm going to let you go first. Who do you have making the playoffs this time around?
I mean, not much change. So I have Terry and Taylor as my top two.
You are still not giving Phil a bye.
No, Phil has a bye.
Oh, okay.
Terry, then Phil.
Okay.
Then Taylor. Sorry, it's early in the morning.
Yes, it is.
Steve, Greg in, and then, man, this is tough. I think
it is tough.
I think Xavier gets in.
Son of
I think you're gonna lose to Taylor now that in week 14 there, man. I think you have a tough.
Good thing I'm going to win this week, so it's not going to matter.
It don't matter because you and Xavier are tied. If Xavier gets to win this week, and he has Darren next week, which should be a win for him.
Should be a win, but I need Xavier not to get the win this week. In case you haven't noticed my screen name yet, this is a cry for help, and that's for the entire fantasy league. I also have Phil at number 1, not below Terry, because I'm not disrespecting the league's first 13-win team. I have Stevie at 2. I think Stevie gets the bye. Stevie should win his next 2 games, though. Inside scoop, I guess, for this week that I'm going to bring up and for the playoffs. As a journalist in fantasy football, I got to spend the day with Stevie yesterday, and I asked him the tough questions, and he is actually very worried about this game with Brian. But I do have Stevie getting the bye. I have Terry at 3, Taylor at 4, Greg at 5, and I have myself getting in on the tiebreaker. It could be any combination of me, Greg, and Xavier. But with the week last week, I pulled one singular point ahead of Xavier in the points tiebreaker. I don't have myself guaranteed a win, obviously, for the next 2 weeks. I don't have Greg guaranteed a win either for the next 2 weeks, but I do have Xavier guaranteed that week 14 win. Darren, feel free to prove us wrong. This week is crucial. I need Greg to beat Xavier because I just need the tiebreaker to not matter. Obviously, I need to beat you, Dan. I need to beat Taylor. These things don't matter. But if Greg, who is already a game ahead of me, can beat Xavier and keep Xavier tied with me, whether I win or lose, I feel like that plays in my favor. So that's what I'm going for. I'm rooting for Greg big time this week. That'll come up later. But yeah, I have Xavier just missing. Mott's is interesting. I have Mott's getting to 7 wins. He needs to steal a win. Then he can get himself involved in the tiebreaker. Dan, obviously, I have myself beating you. I'm hopefully you lose to Phil. So I think you're just kind of stuck in 6-win purgatory. Very interesting week, but yeah, our playoff situations are very similar. I just think I sneak in on the tiebreaker that I absolutely stole from Xavier last week. The playoffs, man. Should be interesting. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Dan, I went 7-0 last week. I picked absolute chalk. I think you did too. I don't know if we disagreed at all, but I went 7-0.
We had 1 or 2 disagreements, so I did not go 7-0. So you pulled a couple more games ahead of me.
Yeah, so I'm at 59-25, but I picked all chalk last week. You guys clearly went against the chalk, and it didn't play out for you. Our first game, he was supposed to be the guest on the show, but his game doesn't matter this week. Phil with 11 wins, taking on Kenny with 3 wins. Sure, we don't got to put a ton of time into this one. I have Phil winning the match. I think Nick Chubb could pull a Joe Mixon and beat Kenny completely on his own. I have a very weird feeling this is going to be an enormous Nick Chubb game. Another big day for Diggs, but Phil hurt a little bit by that Knox week.
Yeah, Phil should get this game pretty easy. I think there's about 2 games that really matter this week that are really contending games. This is not one of them. It'll be interesting to see if he changes his lineup. He has Cooks in there still, who's out this week.
So I was going to bring that up for Phil in the long run. People have been shitting on Phil's depth quite a bit, and I've been shitting on his tight end situation, and his tight end situation hasn't mattered when he's playing the field. But when he gets into this final 6, if he starts losing his flex position and his tight end is having 0-point games, he has a quarter of a point. How do we even get a quarter of a point in our? Oh, he must have made an assisted tackle on an interception.
Yep, that's exactly what it was.
Okay, so anyway, so as we get into the playoffs, I know you've been kind of like beating up on Phil's team all season. I'm going to give you a chance to do it again. These things could actually hurt Phil in the playoffs. That week 1 bye is going to help. So Phil's going to be in a final 4 situation with bad tight end play and possibly bad flex play.
You know, his team has shown all year that he can overcome that. I mean, he's had huge monster weeks, 140, 150, 160-point weeks. But, I mean, I'll give Phil credit. I was wrong on his team. He has a much better team than what I anticipated him having. It's been a great year for him. I'm happy for him. I don't anticipate him winning the championship. I think that there are other teams in this league that are more solid throughout their lineup, where they're not depending on these just huge weeks from these 2 or 3 players. Which it's worked out for him so far for the majority of the season. He's had some down weeks, but the schedule's broke his way on who he's playing on those bad weeks, and so we'll see. But I don't anticipate him winning a championship this year.
If nothing else, the thing this show has done for our league is that Phil, who was your friend that you brought into the league,
He's still
he's
my
been
friend.
with
I
us.
still love him.
Still your
crap
friend.
on this team.
But he's been with the league for 4 years now, 4 years. The rest of the league is rooting for Phil at this point. Your problems that you gave Phil at the beginning of the season have turned the league into fans of Phil, and so we're all rooting for him. Maybe not to win the championship, but it's going to be interesting. I think he gets the win this week. Next up, inconsequential games. Taylor, 9 wins, taking on Darren with 3 wins. I'll let you go first on this one, buddy.
Again, Taylor should walk away with this win, although Taylor's team did another down week last week, only scoring 100. If there was one other takeaway I was going to take, it would have been Xavier and Taylor's low-scoring game from both of them.
Oh, that's a good one, yeah.
You don't want to have these playoff battles and your team's falling apart, which I think is the possibility for Xavier. Less worried about Taylor's team, but
Taylor's team is called contenders or pretenders because of exactly this. Not a great Thursday night for Taylor as well. This is a good week not to have it, but 8 points out of the Patriots defense is quite average. Only 4 points out of Nick Folk. To be honest, this is almost that weird week for like NFL teams where they get to see what they have and their weird bench players. And this is an enormous week for Kieran Williams and Van Jefferson for Taylor because the Rams have lost everything. They still suck at quarterback, but Kieran Williams has done well in the pass catching game. It's going to be interesting to see if they continue that. And Van Jefferson is the default wide receiver 1 now. Justin Fields in his first game back. Shoulder injuries can be tricky. Darren could keep this game close at wide receiver. I understand Taylor is stacked at wide receiver, but Taylor has home run threats at wide receiver. But everywhere else, just overall, I think it's going to be too much for Darren in this game. I think Taylor walks away with it.
I feel like Taylor's team really comes down to how Swift and Kamara do. He knows what he's going to get from his receivers. If they come around with 3-4 point games, I think those are the games he's going to be in trouble. When Swift and Kamara have their good games, they'll carry Taylor to 170 points a week.
Exactly. So, and Swift has been getting more involved, but they seem to keep him strictly in the passing game. We're going to talk about Big Jamal Williams a little bit later. Stevie, 9 wins, taking on Brian with 2 wins. I had this as our third game. Interestingly enough, Stevie is worried. I don't think the Buffalo defense on Thursday night did him any favors, but Stevie thinks Brian could absolutely pull this game out, Metzger.
Stevie is that guy that is either I am 100% winning this week or I am 100% losing this week. Like he is either super up on his team or super down on his team. I'm always worried about Stevie's team just because of again,
it's fair, and you have been this whole season.
And his team has shown why. Like he's been inconsistent and he's lost his depth. I mean, he's starting Pickett as his quarterback this week. You can't feel good about your
Kyler
team.
Murray's on bye. That's not a loss of depth issue. And he had a strategy. He figured if Keeper George is Brian's best player, why not cancel him out by starting his quarterback? I'm also worried about Kenny Pickett this week. I think we could see big interceptions, and those interceptions are big penalties in our league. So
I guess I was more going at with Pickett thing is that, he's starting him in a situation where he's worried about this game and there's no other better option in his eyes out there. I don't know. I see why he's worried is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense. I don't love the Vikings this week. When I was doing my real rankings, I'm turning into a Jets fan. Maybe it's being here in New York, but I like what Robert Saleh's doing over there. I love what Sauce Gardner's doing this season. I would not be surprised to see a bad Justin Jefferson week, and Brian can't win a game on a bad Justin Jefferson week. But I like some of the pickups Brian's made. I like this Donovan Knight kid. I'm going to be interested to see how he plays this week, but we spend entirely too much time on this team. Go ahead.
I want to say one more thing, but I think Brian has done a great job of just building this team up throughout the year. Because at the beginning of the season, he was scoring 40, 50 points a game. Now he's dropping 80, 90, close to 100 points a game. So he's done a really good job of picking up the right guys and making this team better, continuing to compete throughout the entire season.
Yeah, and not tanking games. Kenny, fuck you. So that was super interesting. Hey, we have a viewer question. Thank you for tuning into the show, Nap Time. Just so you're fully aware, this is a show where we cover our specific home fantasy league, but we do love to answer questions like this. So Metzger, he's wondering if he should run out Jared Goff this week or Tua Tagovailoa.
Jared has been so inconsistent this season, multiple negative point games. I would always run Tua out there versus Jared Goff.
Yeah, in my rankings, I have Tua fairly far ahead, even with the tougher San Francisco matchup. You're going to want to bet on Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill And I think that's where Tua has the big advantage. Jared Goff taking on Jacksonville this week. I have this funny feeling Jacksonville just absolutely boat races the Detroit Lions. I think Jacksonville is playing very, very well, and I think it's going to be a big Jacksonville week. So yeah, I'm on board with Tua. I'm very interested. Jameson Williams could have his first game back today. I don't know that changes anything for Jared Goff, but I'm interested to see this kid play. I've been very excited.
I'm interested to see him play. I think it could open up the offense a little more than now he's having to throw to St. Brown all the time. And I think they also got Chalk back this week as well, DJ. So they have some more weapons. I don't think it's a terrible play to go Jared, but I would definitely go to over him if he's an option.
I see why he's asking the question, because San Francisco's defense has been very good. They just shut out New Orleans last week. So
it's not a terrible question. It's just I would trust Tua to make more plays. And I think that their head coach coming from San Francisco last year, he's gonna have some stuff up his sleeve that he knows will work a little bit better against San Francisco. And I think just kind of what you said though, I think that Detroit Jacksonville game will be a closer game than what you think.
Interesting.
I think Detroit will hang with them, maybe even get the win.
All right. Hey, we got another one. Thanks for tuning in so early, everybody. Just another quick reminder. You're going to hear us talking a lot about our specific fantasy league. That's why we created the show, but we are very much happy to help people out. Drifter Thrifter is stuck, Metzger. He has Brian Robinson, Rachaad White, Najee Harris, and he can only play one. I'm going to quickly throw in, I don't mess around with injury concerns. So me personally is eliminating Najee Harris from this argument. So for me, it's Brian Robinson versus Rachaad White. Dan,
I agree with that 100%. I would not go with Harris at all, just because you saw what happened last week. He made it through one and a half quarters, and he was out for the rest of the game. You don't want to mess around with that risk. I would personally go with White in this situation. I think he's proven to get more playing time down there in Tampa Bay, and with that offense and the pass catching with Tom Brady possibility, I would go with White.
I'm probably going with Rachaad White too. I think it was 9 targets last week. So if you're in a PPR league, Drifter, I'm definitely leaning. Oh my goodness, I don't know where Drifter Thrifter is, but he is. It's 10:20 at night. He's tuning in with us while we're in the northeast side of the United States. It's 7:20 in the morning. We normally do this show on Thursdays, but if you guys are going to join us early on a Sunday morning, Dan, we might need to change. But anyway, the pass catching ability for Rachaad White, I'm a big proponent of targets are what really make running backs valuable. Even if you're not in a PPR league, I've done the studies that targets are actually even better in standard leagues. If they're going to heavily involve him, Dan, spoiler alert, I don't like Mike Evans this week. I think he gets ejected. So they're going to need Rachaad White to come back in here. So I think it's going to be another big Rachaad White week. So thanks for the question, guys. If you have more, drop them in the chat. Dan, we got Terry with 8 wins taking on Kenny's team with just 4 wins. I have Terry pulling this win out. Basically, I put as long as Jamal Williams keeps scoring, it's going to be hard to pick against Terry with the touchdowns he's been scoring. And Terry's just kind of better at every position. But I do have an interesting, I don't want to say proposal, but Taylor kind of might have jinxed Terry last week when Taylor said that Taylor keeps starting Swift and Terry keeps benching Jamal Williams and Swift keeps sucking and Jamal Williams keeps scoring. Now that Terry's putting Jamal Williams in his lineup, is this a Jamal Williams choke week? I don't know that it's going to matter in this game taking on Kenny's team. Kenny doesn't want to get wins, but it's going to be interesting to see if Terry starts relying on Jamal Williams and he falls apart for him. But Terry's just strong at every single position. The emergence of Brandon Ayuk has been really great for Terry on top of, Jamal Williams falling into the end zone every week.
I think Terry gets to him. I think it's actually going to be a really close game. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. Williams will continue. I think Williams is still that job in for himself. I think Terry is safe to start him. But I think the combination of Burrow and Chase going for JR is going to keep him in this game. I think that the Kansas City Cincinnati game is going to be a high-scoring game today.
I hope it is, obviously, for my team's sakes as well. But yeah, getting Jamar Chase back is obviously huge for Kenny. But I mean, he's not going to tank Kenny. He's not going to tank, and I don't know that his team's going to have enough. You can't bench those guys, but it's going to be interesting. Kenny doesn't want to win, is what I'm trying to say. I do want to throw out here. Drifter makes an interesting comment that no injuries. He's starting Fields over Tua. Yeah, I mean, Fields was the best quarterback in fantasy football before the injury, and now you just got to see what's happening. What he does with his legs is unparalleled, and it's going to be very, very interesting. And then he said, we were talking about the Jamal Williams curse. He has the Tony Pollard curse. If he needs him, he scores fewer than 10 points. But if he plays him, it doesn't work out real well for him. Speaking of Jamal Williams, or excuse me, Tony Pollard, rather, I'm going to skip a game just because it's relevant to what he said. We have Greg taking on Xavier, and I'm a little worried about Greg starting both Dallas running backs this week. For folks who don't know about our league, we are a very deep league, 14 teams. We start 10 players, so sometimes you got to make some interesting roster decisions. Greg has been riding high and starting both Dallas running backs. I still have Greg pulling this out. This might just be karma for me, Dan, because I need Greg to win to get me into the playoffs. But what do you have a feeling about this game? Because this game has enormous playoff implications with Greg sitting at 8, Xavier sitting at 7 wins. So.
If you had asked me before I saw who their rosters were when I was doing the research for the show, I would have said, I think Greg's going to get the win. Greg's team's been playing better recently. Xavier's team seems to be falling off, but I don't like the fact that he is starting 2 Cowboys. I'm worried about Deebo Samuel, whose production has been really limited since the McCaffrey trade. And he's hurt on top of it. You just don't know Josh Jacobs is playing, they say, but he is hurt as well. I just have this feeling that Xavier's going to come out and get this win today. So I'm going to take Xavier, even though I really, really want Greg to win.
You bring up an interesting point on the Deebo Samuel, and on the flip side of that, Christian McCaffrey now loses competition in Elijah Mitchell. Do they lean on Christian McCaffrey fully? And if they do, that's going to give Xavier a very big advantage. I'm a little worried about Travis Etienne. Again, I don't play games with injuries. However, they seem really adamant that he could have went back in last week, and the kid is absolutely fine. They did still hit him with that questionable tag. We talked a lot about Tua Tagovailoa, but Tua's taking on San Francisco, whereas leaning on another Cowboy, Dallas is taking on Indy, and Greg has Dak Prescott. So it's an interesting game. Not a great showing by Tyler Bass, but 7 points out of your kicker. He at least did what he was supposed to do. So, and then Drifter Thrifter says he's fine with starting the double players. You get the built-in insurance as long as you know who's getting the Buffalo running back. Absolutely true. I hope it works for Greg this week, because if Greg wins, my playoff chances are better. One other game that I skipped over, Dan, before we get into our matchup, Rob Mott's taking on Steve Horvath. Normally, this game would have been way low. Rob, a 6-win team. Horvath, a 1-win team. But Horvath has just absolutely turned it on to end the season. Unfortunately, I don't know that there's enough luck to keep this thing going. I am going to pick Mott's. However, Mott's got average Josh Allen on Thursday night with just a 15-point scoring in our scoring format. But he sucked one out with Isaiah McKenzie again. Started him in his flex. I hate Thursday players in the flex, but I don't think he has any injury issues to be worried about. But a 5-catch Isaiah McKenzie gave Rob just enough to keep him ahead in the projections. I think this could be a huge Mike White game. Again, I'm becoming a Jets fan all of a sudden. I think this could be a huge Mike White game, and Horvath could keep this interesting, but he is going to have to rely on Najee Harris. I don't love a lot of what's going on here for Horvath. I'm picking Rob Mott's, Dan.
I'm picking Rob as well. I think he only needed average Josh Allen to win this week. He just couldn't have bad Josh Allen to win. I don't think Mike White's going to have a very good week this week. I think the Vikings defense is going to have a good week against Mike White.
Really?
Yeah, I understand Mike White had a good week last week. That's fine. He had a really good week last year, too, for 1 week, and then came out and laid an egg the very next week.
Yeah, he had like that 403 touchdown game or whatever.
And then the very next week was absolutely awful. I think it's one thing to be Mike White playing at home on a random week, to a team actually having film on you, seeing what you're doing, and having you go on the road and try and play well there. So Minnesota's a tough place to play.
It is, but their secondary is awful. So maybe I'm more hopeful for Garrett Wilson than Mike White, but I would like to see another 2-touchdown game out of Garrett Wilson. Our buddy is taking our advice. He's running Rachaad White out there, and he's going to come back and scream at us. So,
no, hey man, we take it all. If we get it wrong, let us know. We'll
and I'm also starting Rachaad White in leagues this week, so I'll be hurting with you, Dan. Before we jump into our matchup, I'm going to bring up a comment on the screen. Our buddy Drifter said, CMC's hurting. He thinks San Francisco is going to pass a lot. I write for a website called Club Fantasy, and I said something similar, that maybe we see more passing out of the San Francisco 49ers this week. He needs another Kittle 2-touchdown game. Dan, you need another Kittle.
I do, man. I'm right there with you. I have Kittle on my team too, man. Let's hope he has a 2 or maybe even a 3-touchdown game. That would be awesome.
So the final game of the week is me with 7 wins fighting for a playoff spot. Dan with 6 wins, technically still fighting for a playoff spot. Dan, after our trade where you sent AJ Brown and Joe Mixon to me, I think there's nothing that can make this season more sweet, whether you make the playoffs or not, than to actually knock me out of the playoffs. I'll go ahead and give my analysis. I think I'm carried by quarterback and IDP. I'm clearly picking myself to win despite the wonderful record you're displaying in your team screen name there. But I think quarterback and IDP carry me. Mahomes versus Watson. I'm actually super down on Watson this week. I think he's going to be rusty. I think Houston, I talked about this on the Club Fantasy show this week. Houston is so bad against the run. Quarterbacks don't tend to do well against them. I'm calling for a huge Nick Chubb game. I said this out loud on Wednesday. I'm going to say it out loud this week. I think Nick Chubb goes for 200 yards this week. So I don't know that Watson's going to be enough. And then I get the double points if Watt can beat up on Atlanta. That's why I went ahead and got the Steelers defense, though I love your defense as well. Certainly not loving the Joe Mixon situation, Dan, but I'm calling for something you and I have talked about, maybe on this show, but definitely in person. I'm calling for the Mike Evans ejection. Marshawn Lattimore is back from injury this week. I think they go at it early. I think Marshawn wants to hit the locker room early on his first game back from injury. I don't think Mike Evans makes it out of the second quarter before they start throwing punches and they both take the ejection. Dan, what are your thoughts?
We have actually talked about that in the show. I called it the first game.
You did.
They ejected.
Yeah.
So, historically, they only fight once, and the other game they're usually pretty civil. So hopefully that's out of the way already. For our game, I do expect you to win. I think you're better matchups this week than I do. I don't like some of my matchups. Watson is the wild card. I don't expect much.
100%.
He could come out absolutely rusty. He could come out emotional being in Houston for that game. But he could also just be that guy who just like, I'm going to really stick it to these guys and come out. And you talked earlier about being a big Nick Chubb game. I don't know, man. It could absolutely be. This game is so interesting to me.
Historically, when I make these bold predictions, they blow up terribly in my face. On my Wednesday show, they get mad at me whenever I predict someone to score 2 touchdowns because that person inevitably scores 0 fantasy points. So it's probably going to be awful. But sorry to do it to you, Nick Chubb. Sorry to do it to you, Greg. Go.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I do think I have a chance at winning the game just because the last 2 times the Bengals have played the Chiefs. So if you and I are going to have a matchup, I'm happy to be playing you on a week that the Chiefs play the Bengals because the Bengals defense has actually played really well against Mahomes and Kelsey.
Yeah.
The one thing they do different than most NFL teams against Kelsey is they're like, we'll give you all the underneath stuff. You can have 10 catches against us for 70 yards, but we're going to limit you to 10 catches, these 70 yards, and it's not those game-breaking plays that he makes. So I'm happy playing you this week. I think that that game could potentially keep me in it against you. And if Watson does have a good game, I think there's a chance I could pull it out.
And the Dolphins have been bad against the tight end. So for you and Drifter, this could be big just in tight end in general that you guys could see some really good play out of Kittle. Even in our league, they're not projecting him for a lot of points, but he could have a way better game than what they're showing.
Dameon Pierce has been down the last few weeks against really good run defenses. Cleveland has a terrible run defense.
One of the worst in the league.
So he could come back and have a big game this week. So there's the chances there, but for my official prediction, I'll take you for the win.
All right. So that pretty much ends the show. We're obviously going to play our little game here. First and foremost, thank you guys so much for tuning in. It was fun to have some interaction this morning, Drifter. He's on your side, Dan. Just met you. He's rooting for the upset. He's rooting for the Hail Mary victory.
That's exactly right. It is a Hail Mary. I have Tom Brady as my other quarterback, and I know he's going to score 15 points. I don't want 15. I don't need 15. I need 25. I need 30 points out of Watson. So let's go. And here's the thing. As a Bengals fan, if Watson sucks today and somehow the Browns lose living in Northeast Ohio, I'm happy either way. What I don't want to have is the Browns win, Watson scores like 15 points, and I don't get
it's not enough to beat me in the fantasy.
Exactly. That's probably what's exactly going to happen.
Browns fans suffering is always good for a Bengals fan living in Northeast Ohio. Dan, I'm going to let you pick first. I have my 2 picks. I'm hoping you don't step on my toes here. So what we do, Drifter, if you want to participate, I'll give you a little time to explain the game real quick. Basically, what we do is we choose the highest scoring quarterback and the highest scoring flex play, any wide receiver, running back, tight end. And our goal is to pick the very top scoring guy at each position. But if you end up with the highest scoring, we'll give you some credit on the show next week. Last week, Dan, there was only just me, you, and Taylor who made our picks. I ended up winning. Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs were my picks. They outscored your Joe Burrow and Austin Eckler. Taylor made his weird picks of Justin Fields and Tyreek Hill. Justin Fields didn't play. Taylor ended up with 10 points. However, none of us hit on the top guys. The top guys last week were Jalen Hurts at quarterback and, of course, Josh Jacobs at flex. Josh Jacobs had a just monster game at running back that, again, screwed our entire playoff field all the way up. So, Dan, who will be the highest scoring quarterback this week? Who will be the highest scoring flex play this week?
I'm going to go Burrow again. Burrow and Chase. I'm going to tag them up. I think it could be a high scoring game with the Chiefs today. Chiefs players coming out talking stuff about how they're going to lock up the Bengals receivers and tight end. Joe Burrow takes that stuff personally, man. I think back to last year when the Ravens defensive coordinator said before their game that, Burrow hasn't earned that gold jacket yet for the Hall of Fame. He doesn't understand why he gets so much credit. Well, Burrow threw for 525 yards against him, and including the Bengals were already up by 30 within the last 2 minutes of the game. He threw a 70-yard pass to Joe Mixon just to add more to it. He takes that stuff personally. I think they're going to come out fired up, ready to go.
Funny story, Dan. So and for our listeners, Brian, big guy in our league, started calling Joe Lucky Joe against you and just busting your balls about how Joe Burrow is lucky. I never told you this. I was listening to some nationally syndicated ESPN show when I was taking my son to school one day. It's whatever Keyshawn Johnson does in the morning. And someone on the show, and it was a big person, said, is Joe Burrow good or is he just lucky? And they just shat on Joe Burrow for like 10 minutes straight. And it's just funny that Joe Burrow hears this shit and he's throwing it back. I'm going to make my picks in a second. But Drifter, I love you, buddy. Mahomes and Kelsey are on my fantasy team that is taking on this guy's fantasy team.
No.
So you are right. You're going to get the biggest shout out ever next week. The show, just so you're aware, is normally on Saturday mornings. We had to do it on Sunday morning. And I know it's nighttime wherever you are, but you'll get a big call out if you're right on this one. My picks are Herbert and Chubb. Obviously, it's Nick Chubb. I'm very big on Nick Chubb this week. I think he's going to have a monster week. And I think Justin Herbert, when I was doing my rankings for Fantasy Pros, when I looked everything over, I normally have Josh Allen near the top of my quarterbacks, if not number one. I moved Herbert all the way up, taking on the Las Vegas Raiders. I think he's going to have a monster week. Still no Mike Williams back, but Keenan Allen's finally starting to come into his own. I think it's going to be a very nice week for Justin Herbert. So my picks for the game are Justin Herbert and Nick Chubb. Dan has Burrow and Chase, and our new buddy Drifter is going with the Kansas City stack, which I would absolutely love to see. I need that win this week. Daniel, parting words for the people.
Same as always. Love you guys. Enjoy the day. Take care. See you guys next week.
Yeah. Just so everybody knows, my parting words, and by everybody, I mean you, Drifter, who has rode with us this entire show. My parting words are always terms of endearment for my opponent. My opponent happens to be my podcast guest this week, my podcast mate this week. Dan, fuck you. Hope your team does absolutely terrible. And oh my God, Drifter, my guy, are you in our league? Do I know you? Because he's all about A.J. Brown blowing it up against the Titans. Also on my team.
Who did you pay to come on and hang out and watch this show?
I have no idea who Drifter is, but he is my new favorite fan.
It's starting to seem a little questionable at this point.
I don't remember who. I already forget the name of my favorite fan from 3 weeks ago, the random people who tuned into this show about our fantasy league. But Drifter, you are my absolute guy now because you're right. Travis Kelce, A.J. Brown, Patrick Mahomes. I'm surprised that you haven't popped into the chat and just talked about the great weeks that my running backs are going to have because you have just been hyping my team up because you're right. David Montgomery is going to have a great week as well. Ramondre Stevenson pretty disappointing on Thursday night, but whatever. Dan, it's been a great show. Rivalry week next week. Drifter, we're going to be doing this for at least the next month. We cover our fantasy league. It was great helping you out this week. Have a great morning. It's too damn early, too damn late where you are. I'm going back to bed too. Let's have some fun. Talk to you guys later.